Hello and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we'll build our own iterators in Python. So building an iterators from scratch is easy in the Python. We have to just implement these two methods over here, which is iter method and the next method. So iter method returns the iterator object itself, which we had seen in the previous lecture, and some initialization also can be performed with the help of this iter special method. But in the case of a next method, it must return the next item in the iterables or a sequence. So iterable can be your list, your tuple, or your string, and on reaching the end and in the subsequent call it must raise the stop iteration. So we have to just handle that iteration, that is our stop iteration exception, while making our program. So we'll just make an example that will give us a next power of 2 in each iteration, and basically power exponent start from the 0 up to the user set number. So in order to make a program, we have to make use of the classes and object. So let's make the classes first. So let me just type here class, and power2 which be our class. So power2 is basically the power of 2, which should be our class, and this class is to implement an iterator that is a power of 2. So let me just define the initializer as always. So that should be initializer, and the first argument over here would be obviously the self, which is our current class object, and the max would be here O. So max basically is our default argument over here, and we'll just assign this max with this max that should be passed while calling this power2 object. So next is to define the special method, and that should be iter method, and I've already said you this iter method is to return the iterator object itself. So let me just define this iter special method over here, and that should be self.n. At first should be, let me say 0, and the next is return me the current self here. Now let me define the next method, which is next another method, special method, and that should be also the default argument with the self. Now it's time to just give the next, which is basically the implementation of next. So what this next method does is you must return the next item from your iterables in this next method. So in order to do that, we have to make use of this condition, that is to check if we have the maximum to be just the number of element. That means if it is not, if it is the case, that means we have to just return our power of 2. So in order to return, we'll just make a result first. So before returning, we have to make a result, and that result should be 2 power, because this is going to perform the power of 2. That should be power of 2 of n. It is same saying that it should be like 2 to the power, it should be 2 to the power something like n over here. So this is n, which is a class variable. That means you have to just pass here self.n. You can't just put here n, because it is not your local variable, it is your global variable of this class variable basically. So you have to just pass self.n over here, and next is we'll just increase the value of n with 1 here, and now let's return that as a result from this next method. So next is to check for the exception. So if it is the case that our max is basically greater or equal to of our n, that means we have to raise this exception, which is stop iteration exception. So we have completed our program where we have calculated our power of 2 of any of these, basically our number. So now let us run this iterator. So before running this code, I want to make you clear about this result, what this pretty much does. So you are just passing the max. So when you just pass a max while calling this object of power2 class, you just pass something like, let me say 4, then you could get the max, that is 0 to 4. So that means you have 0, and you have 1, you have 2, and you have 3, and you have 4. So this will be your element. So while calling with this element, you just go to this next, and you just see here something that is 2 to the power self.n. So in the first case it would be 0. That means you just pass 2 to the power 0 at the first, and it should be just a 1. And in the next iteration it should be 2 to the power 1, it should be 2, and similarly you get 2 to the power 2, it should be your 4, and in the next it should be 2 to the power 3, which should be your 8, and the last one would be your 16, which is your 2 to the power 4. So this will be your all result, that is 1 2 4 8 16 in your result. So basically if there is, that is in the case of another next calling of these iterables, when you just call one more time after you just call this one, then it is going to show you a stop iteration, because we don't have any element to show the power of basically that 2. So we'll just see the output here again. So let me just go here and run this with the pressing F5. And first of all, we have to now create the object of that class. So creating object is really easy. We have to just call this pow2 class, and let me just make instance of this, and let me just pass here 4, which is our max. Now we have to just call this iter in order to create the iterable of this a. Now it's time to make use of this next method. So next method will be to iterate through these iterables. So first of all, I'll just say I should be iterator. So first will be obviously the 1, which is basically 2 to the power 0. So next is basically 2 to the power 1, which should be 2, and next one would be our 2 to the power 2, that should be 4. Next one would be 2 to the power 3, that should be 8, and next one would be 2 to the power 4, that should be 16. And if I just say next of 5, it should give you something like a stop iteration over here, which is raising an exception in the case which we have no further element to be iterate in this iterators, which is basically the implementation of the for loop inside or in the hidden context. So you can simply do something like, so let me save this code again and run this and show you the implementation of for loop instead of just making a iterator object and making use of this next in order to just call all of the object of the iterables. So I'll just make use of this loop, which should be for I in this pow2, and that should be our object over here. So let me just say pow2, and I'll just pass 4 over here, and now we'll just say print me I. Then you could see the same output over here. That is the case of that next. So you could see 1 2 4 8 and 16, and you don't have stop iteration because we have implemented stop iteration. That is in the case of stop iteration, you have to just do something like break. So it is handled using the try and catch block, and we have already seen in the previous example how this for loop is internally implemented using these iterators in Python, using this try and catch block, where we just catch this exception and we break from the loop in order to handle this exception, and basically we make use of this next method in order to get every element in our continuously or infinitely running loop, which is basically while true loop. So this was implementation of the for loop using these iterators. So this will be the wrap for this lecture. See you in the next one.